everybody will be in the same team, either Team Ukraine or, if you want, Team Palestine, Team Israel, Team Russia. I want us to be in Team Humanity, for God's sake. This is what we have to do for the generations behind. This is the reason why I will say at the end, Slava Ukraini, because you are defending the international law. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. Allow me now to get one voice back again to the Presidency of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Mr. Denis Bećirović, the floor is yours.
Respected Excellencies, first of all, I want to thank Her Excellency Viola Amherd, the President of the Swiss Confederation, for taking over the role of host and for the excellent organization of this important summit. Support for Ukraine means support on protecting international law and the basic principle on which the civilized world is based. The state of Bosnia and Herzegovina, as a victim of brutal aggression from 1992 to 1995, fully understands the suffering and hardship of the citizens of Ukraine. Unfortunately, once again, Europe is facing policy of territorial expansionism. The ultimate goal of the wars of aggression against Bosnia and Herzegovina and Ukraine is the same, that of territorial expansion. That is why one of the messages from my country read, "Learn from Sarajevo, save Kyiv." I believe that a just, lasting peace in Ukraine has no alternative. Russia's aggression against Ukraine in the previous 28 months has caused terrible consequences. Bosnia and Herzegovina, after the start of Russian aggression, has aligned itself with the position of the European Union and firmly expressed its support for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine. My country regularly aligns with statements, initiatives and decisions condemning Russian aggression. The free world, among other things, has two important tasks. First, to help the people of Ukraine to defend their country. The second, not to allow Russia to cause a new war on the European continent and thus divert attention from the aggression against Ukraine. Let's not forget, these two tasks are related. Therefore, I must warn that pro-Russian forces in Bosnia and Herzegovina are threatening the peace. The authorities of Bosnian and Herzegovinian entity, Republika Srpska, with the open support of Russia, are jeopardizing the Dayton Peace Agreement and threatening the stability of Bosnia and Herzegovina and the region. Therefore, I call on the free is more important today than ever. For Ukraine to win, solidarity must win over state egoism. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you, Excellency. As next speaker, may I invite the President of Montenegro, Jakov Milatović, to give his address.
Thank you, Chairman. Dear President Amherd, dear President Zelensky, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, it is of extreme importance that we have gathered today in Bugenstock in such a great number. And I would like to commend Switzerland for managing to convene this important event and having us together trying to map out first steps towards peace in Ukraine. And it is both an honor and a duty for all of us, the leaders from around the world, to stand united on this important matter. Our yesterday's and today's gathering reflect our commitment to seek a path to peace. And the precondition to peace is clear. We must continue to provide firm support to Ukraine against the unjustified aggression from Russia. In the Balkans, we have seen the devastating consequences of nationalism and territorial aggression. The scars of such conflicts endure for generations, leaving behind a legacy of suffering and instability. Montenegro today, as a member of NATO and a forthcoming member of the EU, has stood by Ukraine from the very day one. We have offered political, military, and humanitarian aid and opened our doors to more Ukrainians per capita than any other country in the world. Firmly believing that the path to peace must be based on the Charter of the United Nations and international law, Montenegro actively supports all the efforts of the international community that are undertaken toward this goal in various formats. Dear colleagues, as a father of three, I'm deeply concerned by thousands of Ukrainian kids forcibly transferred to Russia or Russian-occupied territories of Ukraine. Although many obstacles are created to prevent them from being reunited with their parents and with their homeland, we all at this table need to do more so that children of Ukraine are back in Ukraine. Dear Excellencies, at the end, once again, we reaffirmed our commitment to the values enshrined in our own constitutions, which are freedom, liberty, and independence. And Ukraine is on the front line defending these ideals. Let us unite in action and determination for the future of peace in Europe and for the future of peace across the world. Thank you very much.
Mr. President, thank you very much. It is my pleasure to hand over the floor to Vice Prime Minister of Sweden, Ebba Busch.
Thank you, Excellencies, colleagues, friends. First of all, Switzerland and President Viola, thank you for bringing us all together. Thank you, President Zelensky, for initiating this. And once again, dear Volodymyr, it was an honor to once again have you and your team on Swedish soil just a few weeks ago, together with the presidents and prime minister of the Nordic countries, supporting Ukraine in exercising its inherent right to self-defense is now Sweden's main foreign policy priority. The disadvantage of speaking at the end is that many things have already been. Once again, dear Volodymyr, it was an honor to once again have you and your team on Swedish soil just a few weeks ago, together with the presidents and prime minister of the Nordic countries, supporting Ukraine in exercising its inherent right to self-defense is now Sweden's main foreign policy priority. The disadvantage of speaking at the end is that many things have already been said. The advantage is to have heard what others have wanted to say. We come from different countries with different experiences, but I believe that all of us in here are united on one conviction. We can never accept the aggression as a means of achieving political objectives. And to our partners from outside of Europe, I want to give my most heartfelt thank you for being here and for your readiness to engage. We hear what you are saying also about other conflicts of the world. I hope that you hear what countries closer geographically to Russia, such as mine, say about what is at stake. I will never, ever forget the words of a young Ukrainian soldier that I had the opportunity to meet in Kiev, who had served for the 79th Air Assault Brigade at the front, lost his legs, had his leg amputated just a few weeks ago before we met. His name is Alexander. And he looked me straight into the eye and he said, "Remember this, Putin will not stop at Ukraine." And I say this with some weight, having Russia as a neighbor. Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine led us to reassess our own policy of 2 centuries and seek, together with Finland, the reassurance of membership in NATO. That's a major change for a country as Sweden, but a necessary one and a direct result of Russia's illegal, unprovoked, and indefensible war of aggression. We want peace, but we want a just peace. A peace that does not embolden an imperialistic Russia, not a peace that will lead to renewed conflict, but a peace that can actually hold. A united world has to be stronger than one single aggression. We're at a crossroads where it's weighing either rule of law or rule of violence. We remain firm in our commitment to finding peace. The path to peace looks like a narrow, a complicated one, but I would like to finish off by saying this. Putin can be the bearer of peace tomorrow. Bring the children back home to Ukraine. Call back the troops to Russia. Slava Ukraini. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Prime Minister. And now it's my pleasure to hand over the floor to the President of Kosovo, Vjosa Osmani.
Thank you, dear President Ahmed, dear President Zelensky, colleagues. Throughout history, the glory of humankind has been defined by the resilient, the brave, and those who, in the face of overwhelming odds, never surrendered. But it is especially shaped by those who, with unwavering conviction, believed in the power of peace and the enduring strength of our shared humanity. These individuals remind us that our greatest triumphs come not from might, but from our ability to foster hope, compassion, and unity. Only 2 decades after the war in Kosovo, where the world came together to our rescue and sent a clear message of never again, through a clear moral compass, the Russian aggression against Ukraine has reminded everyone in my country of 2 things. First, of the horrendous and unimaginable suffering that the war brings. And second, that now it is our turn to give back. Since February 22, the world witnessed an aggression that not only threatens the sovereignty of a nation, but also the very soul of Europe. But Ukraine will prevail, because there is nothing and no one that can stand on the way of a people that wants to be free. The people of Ukraine have lit up a fire of hope that no tyranny will ever be able to extinguish. As a nation that was devastated by the suffering of war, I want to point out that this moment demands that we stand firm, ensuring that our commitment is measured not in days or months, but in the steadfastness of our support until Ukraine's sovereignty is restored and just peace prevails. This fight is not merely Ukraine's fight. It is the battle for our shared values and the ideals that today are under siege, but are as enduring as the spirit of those who defend them. We've offered Ukraine support in all fronts, from the human dimension to military aid. But let's not forget that the echoes of conflict do not fade with the silencing of guns. They linger in the minds and hearts of those touched by its horrors. This is why we're committed to not just relief, but also to recovery and resilience, supporting Ukraine in its moment of need and far beyond. Recovery doesn't just mean rebuilding the buildings, but also the human spirit of those who suffered most. Because even decades after, you will see the pain in the eyes of the mothers of the children forcibly disappeared, of the survivors of the sexual violence, of those who lost their families for the war. But to give up now would be not just to forsake the people of Ukraine, but to forsake the very ideals that we have pledged to uphold. And as we support Ukraine, let's make sure that we do not do that by rewarding the aggressor, because that would mean revisioning history. Colleagues, 25 years ago, I was a child of war, deported from her house, hiding from the shelling of the aggressor, in the mountains, holding a little radio in my hand, listening alongside many other children, while leaders like yourselves were discussing whether to come to our rescue or not. Later on, I became a refugee. But you did come to our rescue. Your countries did not turn a blind eye to our suffering. You came to our rescue and you gave me a chance to come back now, 25 years after, and thank you for becoming our saviors. I hope you give that same chance to the children of Ukraine. Thank you.
Madam President, thank you very much. Now I invite the Secretary General of the Council of Europe, Maria Bećirović, to make her contribution. No? You don't want? No problem. Let's go ahead. May I give the floor to the Secretary of the Security Council of Armenia, Armen Grigoryan. No, not at all. Then the next one will be the United Arab Emirates. I'm pleased to invite the diplomatic advisor to the President of the United Arab Emirates, Anwar Gargash, to give his intervention.
President Amherd, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the President of the United Arab Emirates, I would like to thank the Swiss Federation for their leadership in convening this conference. The UAE believes that diplomacy remains the only viable way to end the war in Ukraine. We are concerned about the risk of further escalation and the resulting strain on the international order. We are facing a growing number of local and regional wars and crises, and we need to reduce tensions and reassert the central role of peaceful diplomacy and mediation in line with the principles of the UN Charter. To that end, the UAE continues to communicate with all parties in the war in Ukraine. We also share the international community's deep concerns about the repercussions of the current situation on civilians in and out of Ukraine. Since the beginning of the Ukrainian crisis, the UAE has sent 14 aircraft to Poland, Moldova, and Bulgaria, carrying more than 1,000 tons of food, medical supplies, and ambulances as part of our emergency relief efforts to assist Ukrainian civilians. We have also provided large numbers of power generators to help alleviate the effect of attacks on the power grid. In this context, I would also like to reiterate calls for parties to the conflict to respect humanitarian personnel and operations and to respect international humanitarian law, particularly the special protections accorded by the Geneva Conventions. Looking to the future, I would like to note ongoing efforts by the UAE and Ukraine to deepen trade ties and conclude a comprehensive economic partnership agreement. Aid is important and urgently needed at this time. At the same time, we need to strengthen the Ukrainian economy and enable the private sector to rebuild the country. However, the long-term outlook for the Ukrainian economy remains bleak if we cannot bring the war to a negotiated settlement. The failure of diplomacy up until now has dramatically increased global polarization, with serious long-term consequences for global peace and stability. The UAE believes that the success of the diplomatic efforts like this summit contributes to creating positive momentum that the international community can build upon to reach a resolution. In this context, I would like to draw your attention to the war and the unspeakable suffering of the besieged population in Gaza. Principles of international law and international humanitarian law have to be applied evenly and consistently. Double standards only play into the hands of those who want to do away with these standards. In spite of the many false starts and setbacks in diplomatic efforts and attempts at mediation, there also have been some notable successes, such as our contribution to prisoner exchanges in Ukraine. I believe we can draw hope from these successes. In this context, I would like to underline the need for the Russian Federation to become part of efforts such as this summit to find a negotiated settlement, a settlement that is in line with the principles of international law, respect for the sovereignty, unity, and territorial integrity of all states. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Excellency. I'm now pleased to invite the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Uruguay, Omar Paganini, to share his thoughts.
Thank you, Mr. President. Excellencies, Uruguay has based its international policy since our early times on the principles of respect for territorial integrity, sovereignty, and peaceful solution of controversies. This may seem obvious, but it is especially significant for comparatively small countries, and it is the only way to sustain peace in the world today. Since the outbreak of the war in February 2022, Uruguay has been emphatic and active in stating its position as a defender of multilateralism and international law. We have supported the UN General Assembly's resolutions on the Russian aggression on Ukraine. We have been vocal, expressing our non-recognition of the instruments of annexation of the temporary occupied territories of Ukraine. We have engaged in the path initiated by President Zelensky's calling and participated in the previous meeting that brought us here today. The number of high-level delegations present here shows the past has been a resounding success. As has been said, the impact of this war has gone much farther than the directly involved countries, so the engagement of the international community is mandatory, but moreover, because basic principles are at stake here. Uruguay supports the outcome of this summit and will continue to stand on the side of peace based on the principles of the Charter of the United Nations. To finish, we want to express our recognition to the Swiss government for the organization of this very remarkably successful summit. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. I'm now delighted to hand over the floor to the President of Albania, Bayram Begay.
Dear Madam President Amher, dear President Zelensky, first let me thank you for organizing this summit and for your hospitality. Second, Albania is honored to participate and fully support this summit. This summit represents a vital gathering of nations, united by the common goal of forging a path out of the darkness of conflict into the light of peace. The Russian aggression against Ukraine has resulted in devastating loss, destruction, and displacement. This human tragedy compels us to prioritize the peace process, not as a distant idol, but as an immediate imperative. It's our responsibility to pave the way toward peace, ensuring that each step taken is a step away from war and conflict. Russian aggression is a blatant breach of core principles of UN Charter, a flagrant violation of international laws, and a threat for peace and security in the European continent and beyond. Our challenge is monumental: to develop a framework for a future peace agreement between Ukraine and Russia. It's imperative that these nations coexist peacefully within the internationally recognized borders. Albania has strongly condemned the Russian aggression. We maintain a clear position in defense of territorial integrity, sovereignty, and independence of Ukraine. Albania considers the President Zelensky peace formula the way to restore just and long-lasting peace for Ukraine. Any peace process must be driven by Ukraine. Albania will continue to support Ukraine until peace is achieved, in line with the UN Charter, and must include accountability for Russia's actions. The road to peace should never be a road to surrender. It is instead a path paved with the courage to uphold our values. As we seek a resolution We must ensure that the support for Ukraine must continue. We gather here not to coerce, but to encourage, not to impose, but to propose paths toward peace that respect the interest and integrity for all. Together, let us transform the hope of today into the peace of tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President Begai. Thank you very much. Now I'm pleased to invite President Nikos Christodoulidis of Cyprus to give his intervention.
Dear colleagues, we are all here today to reiterate once again that Ukraine is not alone. This broad participation of leaders reflects our strong commitment for lasting peace in Ukraine, for lasting peace in the European continent, in a time where the perception that peace is given has crumbled. Our presence here today aims also to highlight the great respect of the international community towards the heroic, brave and resilient Ukrainians. Today, we'll all actively and collectively substantiate that our solidarity and support to both Ukraine and its people, as well as towards establishing a just and sustainable peace, remain solid, far-reaching and unified. Dear friends, Russia's ongoing war against Ukraine, Russia's illegal invasion to Ukraine has caused unthinkable consequences for the country and immeasurable loss of its people. It also led to devastating regional and global repercussions. Russia's actions have endangered food security for millions of people across the globe. It is therefore crucially important to keep shipping channels open so that Ukraine exports its products, making it adamantly clear that food security must in no way be weaponized. An additional tragic humanitarian aspect of this war are the captives, prisoners of war, and the Ukrainian children forcibly deported to Russia. A generation of Ukrainian children has experienced fear, loss, tragedy, violence, both physical and psychological, for more than 2 years. Today, we reiterate our determination and persistence to act. Dear colleagues, this war must come to an end. Illegality stemming from invasion, occupation, and use of force will never be tolerated or recognized. We remain at Ukraine's side, assisting all just efforts for a lasting peace in the country. At the same time, our respect for the inviolability of borders, the territorial integrity and independence of all states is unconditional for all nations across the world. I truly hope that today's summit will pave the way for a meaningful dialogue on a results-oriented platform that will eventually set a path towards a comprehensive peace based on international law and the core principles of the UN Charter. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President. I now announce the President of North Macedonia, Gordana Silanovska-Davkova.
Thank you. Dear colleagues, first of all, my sincere congratulations on the successful organization of this Summit for Peace. It was not an easy feat, and you should be satisfied and proud to have gathered so many countries in one place for such a noble cause. Ukraine is a burning issue not only for Europe, but for the entire world. The fact that I am representing my country at the highest level today is another confirmation of our principled position and firm support for the territorial integrity of Ukraine. Let me repeat that this war affects us all. Ukraine undergoes massive human suffering and destruction. Europe's security architecture is under threat. Globally, the lives of millions of people are affected by the grave economic consequences. we have gathered here in Switzerland to help Ukraine navigate the road from unjust war to a just peace. We condemned Russian unprovoked and unjustified war of aggression in the strongest possible way, and we supported Ukraine in the best way we can. I want to stress several items at the end. While we support Ukraine's Euro-Atlantic aspirations, and we have sent military equipment through NATO's comprehensive assistance package. And the question we are facing now is how can we help Ukraine not only end the unjust war, but also achieve a just and principled peace. First, as a sovereign nation, only Ukraine can decide for its own future. Second, a just peace must be rooted in the UN Charter principles of sovereignty and territorial integrity. Russia's attempt to acquire territory by force is a flagrant violation of basic tenets. When dangerous precedents go uncontested, they can turn into tolerated practices. Compromises with international law and principles can threaten European and even world peace and security. The only way to avoid this is to respect the UN Charter and the principles of international law without exception. Refraining from the use of force, respect for sovereignty, territorial integrity, and inviolability of borders, and protecting human rights and fundamental freedoms are non-negotiable principles. The last, since unpunished crimes can breed more crime, a just peace should include accountability. While the development of the framework for a future peace agreement is undergoing, we will continue to support a free, independent, democratic, and sovereign Ukraine. My last sentence. I remember the question arisen by Hemingway, for whom the bell tolls. My short answer is, for us, not only as the responsible politicians, but also as human beings. Thank you.
Thank you, President. I'm now pleased to announce the address from Rosemary DiCarlo, Under-Secretary General of the United Nations.
President Ahmed, President Zelensky, the United Nations is pleased to join this meeting as an observer. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has maintained a clear and consistent stance. Russia's invasion of Ukraine violates the United Nations Charter and international law and has caused immense suffering to the people of Ukraine. Further, UN General Assembly resolutions have supported the sovereignty, independence, unity, and territorial integrity of Ukraine within its internationally recognized borders. Many voices during this meeting have stressed the need to adhere to the principles of the UN Charter. These principles are as valid today as they were in 1945. Excellencies, since the start of the war, the UN has worked with the Ukrainian government and civil society to mitigate the war's impact, particularly on the most vulnerable. This year, thanks to the generosity of donors, we've provided life-saving assistance to 4.4 million people. While the humanitarian needs set to grow due to escalating hostilities, sustained support to the 2024 Ukraine Humanitarian Needs and Response Plan remains essential. The United Nations is also engaged in the areas discussed in detail during this summit: the human dimension, nuclear security, and food security. This summit has served as a valuable opportunity to discuss efforts towards peace, and as such, it can help lay the groundwork for a future process to end this horrific war. At the United Nations, we are ready to support all initiatives toward a just, lasting, and comprehensive peace in Ukraine that are based on the UN Charter, international law, and relevant resolutions of the General Assembly. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. May I hand over the floor to the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Mexico, Alicia Barceda.
Thank you very much. I thank President Viola Amherd and Federal Counsel Ignacio Cassis for hosting this important summit. Greetings from President Andrés Manuel López Obrador of Mexico. We come here to exchange ideas on the pathways towards a comprehensive, lasting, and peaceful solution, which we would like to say that this war in Europe is posing an existential security threat, not only for Europe, but for the global community as a whole. It is time then, because we in the Global South are suffering also the consequences related to food security, energy, and of course it is time, we believe, to advocate for peace and not war. Mexico is here to reiterate its long-standing commitment with all the fundamental principles of the UN Charter and the respect for international law and for sovereignty and territorial integrity. We are against violent invasions and aggressions, including diplomatic facilities. Although several peace initiatives have been presented, none seems to have gathered the universal international support needed to be successful. On the contrary, we are seeing an escalation, and more deployment of arms and military equipment at the expense of the suffering of civilians, particularly women and children. Mexico has repeatedly called for the solving of the Russo-Ukrainian conflict through negotiation, mediation, dialogue, and diplomacy, and less armamentism. Mexico has been at the front line in the battle for disarmament and nuclear security. Tlatelolco Treaty is an example of that. We are deeply concerned about the nuclear security and the threats that are emerging in the context of this war. We unequivocally condemn any threat to the use of nuclear weapons under any circumstances, and we call urgently for the preservation of the integrity of the nuclear facilities in Ukraine. The permanent members of the Security Council have an historical responsibility to uphold the UN Charter and to avoid irresponsible actions that endanger peace. All parties involved we are very concerned about the proliferation of weapons in Europe, and we believe that we must avoid that many of these arms are diverted to the illegal market and falls into the hands of non-state actors fueling their criminal acts. Let me tell you that we support four things. Number one, first, it's imperative that we devote diplomatic efforts for the Russian Federation to be included in this discussion. Second, we must bring the peace process under the umbrella of the United Nations. Third, agreements and gradual negotiated steps should be considered to build confidence. And fourth, Mexico is following closely the work of the International Criminal Court entrusted to investigate Russian attacks in Ukraine energy infrastructure. We all agree with me that the world cannot resist the protracted conflict. Finally, we cannot be talking about peace, and here we join South Africa, without mentioning other humanitarian tragedies as the one taking place in Gaza. International law and the UN Charter must be respected in every case, otherwise we will end up in a similar situation than the world was in 1939. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, dear Minister. May I now hand over to His All Holiness Ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomeus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. War is always destructive. To remain silent in front of the cruelty of war is a shame. It is our duty and mission to defend and promote peace. Blessed are the peacemakers. Your Excellencies, distinguished participants, dear sisters and brothers. It is therefore at once an honor and an obligation to attend this summit on peace in Ukraine, initiated by Her Excellency President Viola Amherd of the Swiss Confederation in partnership with His Excellency President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine. The driving force behind this summit has been the emphasis on and the power of dialogue. Dialogue across all borders of nations and all levels of society, beyond state and political interests, as well as in collaboration with corporate and security concerns. This includes cultural, but above all, religious and spiritual dimensions. This is precisely why, on the 5th of January 2019, in response to the pastoral needs of the Orthodox faithful in Ukraine, the Ecumenical Patriarchate established the Orthodox Church of Ukraine as an autocephalous or self-governing ecclesiastical entity, independent of the Patriarchate of Moscow. And we did this against all odds and at all costs, because we firmly believe that the Orthodox Christians in Ukraine deserve an ecclesiastical voice of their own. We stand here, all of us, in support of a just and lasting peace in a sovereign Ukraine. May God grant rest to all those who have tragically lost their lives and give strength to all those who defend peace. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Your All Holiness. It is my pleasure to hand over to the Secretary of State of the Holy See, His Eminence Cardinal Pietro Parolin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Excellencies, dear participants, the Holy See welcomes the convening of this high-level summit on peace for Ukraine, co-hosted by Switzerland and Ukraine. This is an event of global importance, carefully prepared by Ukraine, which, while making enormous efforts to defend itself from aggression, has also worked continuously on the diplomatic front, eager to achieve a just and lasting peace. In the face of war and its tragic consequences, it is important never to give up, but to continue to seek ways to end the conflict with good intentions, trust, and creativity. This is the message Pope Francis conveys, particularly to the rulers of nations, with his ongoing appeals for peace in Ukraine. It is important to reiterate that the only means capable of achieving true, stable, and just peace is dialogue between all the parties involved. The Holy See expresses its hope that the diplomatic effort currently being promoted by Ukraine and supported by so many countries will be improved in order to achieve the result that the victims deserve and that the entire world is hoping for. In accordance with its nature, the Holy See is participating as an observer, paying particular attention to the respect for international law and humanitarian issues. With regard to the first aspect, it wishes to reaffirm the validity of the fundamental principle of respect for the sovereignty of each country and for the integrity of its territory. The Holy See expresses great concern from the tragic humanitarian consequences and is especially committed to facilitating the repatriation of children and encouraging the release of prisoners, especially seriously wounded soldiers and civilians. The reunification of minors with their families or legal guardians must be a paramount concern for all parties, and any exploitation of their situation is unacceptable. It is therefore imperative that every available channel is strengthened to facilitate this process. In addition, the Holy See participates as an observer in the work of the International Coalition for the Repatriation of Ukrainian Children from Russia. Furthermore, it maintains direct contact with both the Ukrainian and Russian authorities with the aim of enhancing the effectiveness of the ad hoc mechanism created following the visit of Cardinal Matteo Zuppi to Kiev and Moscow with a view to resolving concrete cases. With regard to prisoners, both civilian and military, there is a great concern over the periodic reports of non-compliance with the Geneva Conventions, in particular about the Fourth Convention, which most directly concerns civilians, and the difficulty of creating, together with the International Red Cross Committee, a joint medical commission that could assess the situation of prisoners of war in need of urgent medical care. Despite of all challenges, the Holy See remains committed to maintaining regular communication with the Ukrainian and Russian authorities and remains prepared to assist in the implementation of potential mediation initiatives that are acceptable to all parties and benefit those who have been affected. At the same time, the Holy See encourages countries and other members of the international community to explore ways of providing assistance and facilitating mediation, whether of humanitarian or political nature. We trust that by supporting these efforts, we can help us find consensus and ensure the timely implementation of these projects. On behalf of Pope Francis, I wish to confirm his personal closeness to the tormented Ukrainian people and his unwavering commitment to peace. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Your Eminence. I am now pleased to invite the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Slovak Republic, Juraj Blanar, to give his address.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, dear Excellencies, dear participants. First of all, I would like to commend and thanks to our Swiss colleague for hosting this important event. Our Prime Minister, Robert Fico, who was supposed to be here today, is not present because of terrible assassination attempt a month ago. So let me convey his personal regards to all participants as he is closely watching the outcomes. Today I would like to deliver 3 key points. Firstly, war against Ukraine is raging on European soil, but it has a far-reaching global implication. No viable solution is thus possible without the global players engaged constructively in the name of UN-centered international law and order. Adherence of international law is crucial importance for maintaining peace all around the globe. For such a small country like Slovakia is especially important. Secondly, the key principles defined by the UN charters and the Helsinki Final Act are indispensable and must be integrated into the political platform like this, driving the peace efforts toward the more concrete future peace plan tabled when conditions are ripe. In the meantime, critical issues like protection of civilians, exchange of war prisoners, return of hostages, freedom of navigation, nuclear safety, etc., need to be efficiently addressed. Slovakia is especially deeply concerned with the security of the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant and fully support the IAEA's effort to implement basic security safeguards and to monitor its operations. To this end, the Slovak government has supported IAEA work with the financial means. Thirdly, Ukraine must survive to become peaceful, independent, sovereign and democratic country with stable, internationally recognized borders and firmly on its path towards the European Union membership. To join Slovak-Ukrainian government session held in this year have confirmed that and produced the roadmap focusing on strategic infrastructure and connectivity, for instance, to help Ukraine with the more and more frequent power outages. Slovakia continues to provide large volume of electricity. Since April 2024, more than 40,000 megawatt hours have been delivered, and we will stand ready to provide more. Ladies and gentlemen, Their Excellencies, Slovakia is around this table because we want to support every peace initiatives, but it is necessary to have all stakeholders involved in the process. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Minister. May I now hand over to the National Security Advisor of the United States of America, Jake Sullivan.
President Amherd, President Zelensky, thank you for hosting this summit, and more than that, congratulations on a tremendous success in this summit. You have gathered 100 countries and institutions from all parts of the world, all regions, representing people from everywhere, and showing that there is broad and deep support for a just peace. More than that, though, what this summit has done is define what the core character, the core foundation of that just peace looks like. And that is the principles of the United Nations Charter, the principles of international law, the notion of sovereignty and territorial integrity, and the basic proposition that no nation should be allowed to conquer another nation by force, period. And that has created a platform upon which Ukraine can stand going forward to negotiate from a position of confidence to secure its sovereignty and territorial integrity and to secure the just peace that the people of Ukraine deserve. And even beyond that, the working groups today gave momentum to the practical steps that we all need to take together on food security, nuclear security, and of course the return of abducted children and the monstrous act of abducting those children, taking them from their homes and families must be rectified, and those children must be returned. What is most interesting in watching these last 2 days is the split screen of this weekend with what we heard from President Putin as he laid out his vision for peace a couple of days ago, where he said, not only does Ukraine have to give up the territory Russia currently occupies, but Ukraine has to leave additional sovereign Ukrainian territory before Russia will negotiate. And Ukraine must disarm so that it is vulnerable to future Russian aggression down the road. No responsible nation can say that is a reasonable basis for peace. It defies the UN Charter, it defies basic morality, it defies basic common sense. By contrast, the vision of peace that was put forward here today from so many different countries, rooted in principles all of us signed up to, rooted in principles all of us would like to live in a world that are ruled by those principles because they make us all safe. This is the right vision as we go forward. And so this summit, from our perspective, is a critical milestone on a path towards a just peace. And the United States of America will proudly walk with Ukraine along that path until Ukraine prevails and peace prevails. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I now give over the floor to Mr. Luis Almagro, Secretary General of the Organization of American States.
Thank you very much. I'm pleased to be here and participate in the summit on peace for Ukraine. I thank the Swiss government for this invitation. I fully agree with the fundamental premises of this meeting. Ethically, we shall always support attempts for peace. Peace is an ethical project, and we shouldn't have any dilemma about it. No moral dilemma about freedom, or about sovereignty, or about territorial integrity or self-determination, or about condemnation of aggression. No moral dilemma about working for peace. No moral dilemma about human rights violations or crimes against humanity. It's about principles, and it's about survival. It is about our work in order to preserve the rule of law internationally. The law of the strongest cannot be accepted. The peace always has to be just. Russia is a great country with a great history, great culture. Tolstoy, Solzhenitsyn, Sakharov, Marina Tsvetaeva. So Russia, to honor their greatness, has to stop sucking the blood of this war. It has been already enough for the whole world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I now give the floor to the Prime Minister of Cabo Verde, José Ulises Correia e Silva.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Excellencies, this summit is a timely initiative. It's timely because it's always important to seek best paths to peace. Cabo Verde firmly supports the international order based on UN Charter and international law. Cabo Verde defends respect for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of states. It's based on these principles that from the outset we condemned Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And we maintain our position consistently. This war caused death and destruction. This war is a threat to global security and the stability of the world economy. The least developed countries are those that suffer most from the impacts of the global economic and food security crisis. The escalation of inflation and the disruption of food supply chains caused by the war are examples of these impacts. The breakdown of the Partnership for Development caused by the war effort is another impact that could worsen. Therefore, the war in Ukraine is not indifferent to any country in the world. Due to the values at stake and the consequence of the war, it is important to fight for peace. We hope that this summit will be a strong step towards a lasting and just peace. Together, we are stronger. Thank you. God bless.
Thank you, Prime Minister. I'm now pleased to invite the President of Latvia, Edgar Rinkēvičs, to take the floor.
Thank you very much, and first of all, thank you, Switzerland and Ukraine, for all the hard work you have done to convene this summit. I do believe that this is the first step in a very long way towards the peace, but I think that the spirit that we have heard and seen yesterday and today is the right one. I do believe also that we as the international community must work out a comprehensive roadmap to the peace, but at least two elements are critical here. First, Russia must withdraw all its armed forces from Ukrainians' territory, and Ukraine's territorial integrity must be restored within its internationally recognized borders. We have discussed a lot about the food security, nuclear safety, humanitarian aspects of the Russian aggression against Ukraine. I think that those three elements actually affect all of us, and I do believe that it is our responsibility to address them in the most serious way. I had my own experience being in Ukraine when the war started on 21st of February 2022. I saw the horror of the first hours. I saw people fleeing, and I think that those memories will be with me throughout the whole life. But I also believe that we are seeing, and many of colleagues have mentioned here, children who have been abducted by Russian Federation, the children who, when they visit our countries, when they have a couple of nights without air alerts, without bombing or drones overflying, they are regaining their childhood. And I think that it is very important that we continue, while we are talking about the peace, addressing the real issues also on humanitarian side. Also, one thing that I want to particularly mention is I'm coming from the country, Latvia, that has history of the Soviet occupation and colonialism. What we see in Ukraine today is what many of countries here present have seen also in the past. Russia is the country that is launching colonial war, and I think that it is also very important that we look at this war from this aspect. Finally, I do believe that we need to work further, and this summit is the first step when now we have the world's community's support to work out the comprehensive roadmap and to continue in the very good spirit that we have seen all here also in the future. Thank you.
Mr. President, thank you so much. And finally, it's my pleasure to hand over the floor to the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau.
President Amherd, President Zelensky, thank you for asking Canada to close these interventions from the floor. And thank you for bringing us all together for this important and successful summit. It is a summit on peace in Ukraine, but it is not just about Ukraine. It is about whether or not the global community will stand up for international law and the rules-based order that protects us all. Canada will always be a strong voice for democracy, freedom, and peace, and standing up for international law and the rules-based order. This is why we keep supporting Ukraine. Our work all together during this summit has helped shape a joint vision of a peace framework based on the UN Charter and international law. We will continue to uphold the fundamental principles embedded in the UN Charter. Before coming to Switzerland, I was in Italy for the G7, where we took significant actions to keep supporting Ukraine, primarily with the major G7 loans to help pay for the damage caused by Russia. When a just and sustainable peace comes, we will all be there to help Ukraine rebuild. What's good about buildings is that they can be rebuilt. But the people who lost their lives, the families destroyed, they won't be able to bring them back. That's the most painful consequence of war, the human suffering. As Volodymyr pointed out last night, today in many, many countries around the world, it's Father's Day. This evening, many of us will be home with our kids. Not everyone is so lucky. Ukraine, thousands of kids have been taken from their families, their home, their communities. Ukraine says that close to 20,000 children were taken by Russia. We've recently seen reports of Ukrainian children being listed on Russian adoption websites. They're being forced to forget their identity as Ukrainians. I think we all know the consequence of removing children from their language, their culture, their families, their identity. It's a form of colonialism that the world cannot abide by. Earlier today, I co-chaired a working session on the human dimension of this war to work towards bringing kids home to their families. And Canada's announcing $15 million in funding to support the reintegration of displaced children returning to Ukraine through improved child protection services and family-based care options. Ukrainian kids belong in their schools, their playgrounds, and their communities. This funding will also improve access to justice for survivors of war crimes, among other measures. This illegal war by Russia needs to end. Humanitarian law and the UN Charter must be respected. We have to keep sending strong signals that our solidarity with Ukraine is as strong as ever and will not fade. Russian aggression has to stop. It won't be easy, but as a dad, I hope that we can all get to a just and sustainable peace in the next year so that Ukrainian kids and families can celebrate Father's Day together, but also that people and families everywhere around the world are able to know that international law and the rules-based order will be defended and upheld by all countries in the world. This is how we protect each other. This is how we protect future generations. This is how we keep the world on the right track. Slava Ukraini, Heroyam Slava, glory to Ukraine, glory to its heroes.